What if the person you ignored on the street was the key to changing your life forever? In a world where most people walk by without a second glance, a small act of kindness can set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. 7-year-old Clara didn't have much, but when she saw a frail beggar struggling outside the factory where her mother worked, she did what no one else dared. She stopped. Clara breaking off a piece of bread, gently placing it in Elias's trembling hands. She gave him bread. She gave him medicine. And in return, he gave her a ring. A simple silver ring that would change everything. The next day, a mysterious fortune appears at Clara's house. Instead of gratitude, her family faces suspicion. The factory workers whisper. The cruel manager, Madame Estelle, accuses her mother of theft. And the beggar? He disappears without a trace. Who was he? And why did he choose Clara? As Clara embarks on a journey to discover the truth, she will face betrayal, heartbreak, and a revelation that will shake her world to its core. Because the beggar was no ordinary man. He was the true owner of the factory. And Clara? She is the heir to it all. This is a story of kindness, injustice, and the power of destiny. Are you ready to discover the secret? Stay with us as we unravel the mystery of the secret heir, a story that proves that kindness is the greatest inheritance of all. The morning sun struggled to pierce through the thick gray clouds that hung over the town. A chill breeze swept through the narrow streets, carrying the scent of freshly baked bread from the bakery and the damp, metallic odor from the nearby textile factory. 7-year-old Clara Beaumont skipped along the uneven cobblestone path, clutching a small cloth pouch in her hands. Inside, a single wooden doll nestled between a few pieces of candy, her little treasures from the town market. She hummed softly, twirling on her tiptoes as she neared the looming iron gates of the textile factory, where her mother, Rosa, worked. The factory loomed like a tired beast, its massive brick walls stained with smoke and age. Clara paused. Workers streamed through the gates, their faces weary, shoulders hunched as if carrying invisible weights. Some moved quickly, eager to clock in before the morning bell. Others dragged their feet, already exhausted before the day had even begun. That was when she noticed him. In the shadows of a cold, secluded corner, hunched against the factory gate, sat a frail, elderly man with disheveled gray hair and sunken eyes. His hands trembled as he clutched his stomach, his breath ragged and weak. Clara's heart clenched. "Why is he just sitting there?" she whispered to herself. A middle-aged woman with a tight bun and an apron hurried past, not sparing the man a glance. Clara called out, "Ma'am, what's wrong with him?" The woman paused, then shook her head with a sigh. "Just a beggar, dear. Best ignore him." But Clara couldn't. She stepped closer, her small hands tightening around her pouch, curiosity and concern battling inside her. "Sir," she asked gently, "are you okay?" The man slowly lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers. They were tired but kind, filled with something Clara couldn't quite understand. I just need something to eat," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara's heart ached. Without hesitation, she opened her pouch, pulling out the half-loaf of bread her mother had packed for her lunch. "Here," she said, placing it in his trembling hands. The man's lips parted in surprise. He looked at the bread, then at Clara. His hands shook as he took it, tears welling in his eyes. "Thank you, child," he murmured, taking a bite as if he hadn't eaten in days. "You have such a kind heart." Clara beamed. "I'll get you some medicine too. Wait here, okay?" The man blinked at her, a glimmer of something unreadable flashing in his gaze. "You do that for me?" Clara nodded eagerly. "Mama says we should always help people when we can." And before the old man could protest, she turned on her heel and ran. Clara rushed home, breathless as she burst through the door of their tiny one-room apartment. "Mama," she called. Rosa, bent over her sewing machine, looked up in alarm. "Clara, what is it?" "I met a man, an old man by the factory. He's sick, and he's hungry. I gave him my bread, but he needs medicine. Can I take some from the cupboard?" Rosa's face softened with worry. "A beggar?" "He's not just a beggar," Clara insisted. "He's just someone who needs help." Rosa studied her daughter for a long moment, then sighed. "All right, but be careful, my love." With the medicine in hand, Clara ran back to the factory gates. The old man was still there. "You're back," he said, his voice trembling. Clara handed him the medicine and a small bottle of water. This should help. The man took them, his eyes glistening with gratitude. He studied her for a moment, then reached into his ragged coat. I have nothing to give you, child. His fingers trembled as he pulled out a silver ring, its metal gleaming despite its worn appearance. But I want you to have this. It's special. Clara's eyes widened. I can't take this. It's important to you. Please, the man insisted, his expression sincere, almost urgent. It will bring you luck. Hesitating, Clara reached out and took the ring. She slipped it into her pocket, feeling its cool metal press against her palm. Thank you, she whispered. The man smiled weakly. No, child. Thank you. The next morning, Clara woke up to her mother's startled gasp. Clara, come here, Rosa called, her voice filled with confusion. Clara jumped out of bed, rubbing her eyes. What's wrong, Mama? Rosa stood near the door, holding a small, unmarked package. Inside was a thick envelope filled with crisp bills. Money, more than they had seen in years. Mama, Clara's heart pounded. Where did it come from? I don't know, Rosa whispered. It was just here, at our door. Clara's hand instinctively reached into her pocket, fingering the silver ring. Could it be? At the factory, whispers spread like wildfire. Did you hear? One worker muttered. A lot of money was sent to Rosa's home. Where could she have gotten it from? Another sneered. By lunchtime, the rumors had reached Madame Estelle. The formidable manager, with her piercing gray eyes and sharp features, stormed into the workroom, her high heels clicking against the factory floor. Rosa Beaumont, she called loudly. Rosa froze, all eyes turning to her. Madame Estelle stepped forward, her lips curling into a cruel smirk. Care to explain how an envelope full of money mysteriously arrived at your doorstep? Rosa's breath hitched. I don't know where it came from. Convenient, Estelle drawled. Perhaps it's stolen? Or maybe a bribe? Gasps rippled through the factory. Rosa's face burned with humiliation. I would never. Enough. Estelle's cold voice sliced through the air. We will get to the bottom of this. And if I find out you've been involved in something improper, you'll regret it. Clara, standing near the door, clutched the silver ring tightly in her fist. She knew where the money had come from. She just didn't know why. The factory buzzed with hushed conversations as workers huddled in small groups, their voices laced with speculation. The air, already thick with the scent of grease and cotton dust, carried an undercurrent of tension that had not been there the day before. Rosa walked through the rows of sewing machines, head bowed, gripping the fabric in her hands with white-knuckled fingers. Did you hear? A woman whispered. An envelope full of money just appeared at her doorstep. A coincidence? Another worker scoffed. I think not. Rosa clenched her jaw, refusing to meet the prying eyes of her co-workers. She could feel their suspicion digging into her back like knives. She took a deep breath and approached Paul, the only worker in the factory she considered decent. Paul, you know me, she whispered. You know I would never. Paul sighed, rubbing a hand over his tired face. I know, Rosa, he muttered. But rumors spread fast. And Estelle? She's looking for an excuse. Rosa's stomach twisted. An excuse for what? Paul hesitated before leaning in. To get rid of you. Rosa's blood ran cold. Clara sat on the schoolyard steps, her fingers nervously twisting the silver ring on her finger. The sun cast long shadows over the cracked pavement, but she barely noticed. Lucy, her best friend, flopped down beside her. You look like you swallowed a frog, she said, nudging Clara with her elbow. Clara frowned. Mama's in trouble. People think she did something bad. Lucy's green eyes darkened. Why? Clara hesitated before pulling out the ring. I met this old man outside the factory gates. He was sick, and I helped him. Then he gave me this. Lucy's eyebrows shot up. And then the money showed up? Clara nodded, her voice barely a whisper. What if it's connected? Lucy took the ring and examined it under the sunlight. This doesn't look like something a beggar would have. Clara bit her lip. I have to find him again. Lucy grinned. Then let's go on a mission. The excitement of their secret plan quickly faded when Charles, the school bully, and his gang of followers approached. Hey, Clara. Charles sneered, arms crossed over his chest. I heard your mom got a bunch of money out of nowhere. What did she do, steal it? Clara's face flushed with anger. She didn't steal anything. That's not what my dad says, Charles continued. He works at the factory, and everyone knows your mom's hiding something. The group of kids snickered. Lucy stepped forward, eyes blazing. You don't know anything, Charles. Charles grinned. Maybe I don't, but I bet the whole town will soon. Clara felt her chest tighten. She turned and ran, tears threatening to spill. Rosa sat at the small kitchen table, her head in her hands, as Clara sniffled beside her. Why do they hate us, Mama? Clara asked, her voice small. Rosa swallowed hard before forcing a smile. They don't hate us, sweetheart. They're just scared of what they don't understand. Clara hesitated before pulling the ring from her pocket. Mama, what if the money came because of this? Rosa's eyes widened. Where did you get that? Clara bit her lip. The old man gave it to me. The one I helped by the factory gates. Rosa's hands trembled as she took the ring, examining it closely. This doesn't look ordinary, Clara. Then we have to find him, Clara insisted. Rosa exhaled. No, this is bigger than us now. Whatever this is, we need to stay quiet. Clara didn't agree, but for the first time, she was truly scared. The next morning, Rosa was summoned to Madame Estelle's office. The air in the office was heavy, thick with unspoken accusations. Estelle, perched behind her large wooden desk, regarded Rosa with cold amusement. Rosa, she said smoothly, you've had quite an eventful week, haven't you? Rosa's stomach twisted, but she lifted her chin. I don't know what you mean. Estelle's lips curled. Don't play dumb. You know exactly what I mean. A large sum of money suddenly appears at your home, and you expect me to believe you don't know where it came from. I don't, Rosa said firmly. Estelle leaned forward, her sharp nails tapping against the desk. Then tell me, who have you been speaking to outside this factory? Rosa stiffened. I don't know what you mean. Estelle's eyes darkened. I saw your daughter talking to that old man at the gate. Did he give you something, Rosa? Panic shot through Rosa like a bullet. I don't. Estelle sighed dramatically. You see, Rosa, I have the power to make life very difficult for you. So let's make this simple. Confess. Tell me where the money came from. And maybe, just maybe, I won't have you thrown out of here. Rosa felt her throat close up. I have nothing to confess. Estelle's expression hardened. Then I'll be forced to call the police. Rosa staggered out of the office, her world spinning. At home that evening, Clara saw the fear in her mother's eyes. Mama, she whispered. Rosa sank into a chair, rubbing her temples. We're in trouble, Clara. Big trouble. Clara clutched the silver ring, her mind racing. They had to find Elias before it was too late. The early morning mist clung to the cobbled streets as Clara and Lucy hurried through town, their small feet barely making a sound against the damp ground. The market stalls were just beginning to open, merchants setting out baskets of vegetables, fish, and bread. We need to find him, Clara whispered urgently, glancing around. Lucy nodded, adjusting her woolen scarf. If he's still in town, someone must have seen him. They stopped at a fruit vendor, a wrinkled old woman who was stacking apples onto a crate. Excuse me, ma'am, Clara said, voice hesitant but determined. Have you seen an old man with gray hair and a beard? He used to sit near the factory gates. The vendor furrowed her brow. The beggar? Clara nodded eagerly. The woman sighed. Haven't seen him in days. But, she lowered her voice, glancing around. There was talk of a well-dressed man speaking to him last week. Strange business. Clara's heart pounded. A well-dressed man? Lucy leaned in. What did he look like? The woman shook her head. Didn't see much. Just that he wasn't from around here. Clara exchanged a look with Lucy. Something's wrong, Lucy whispered. What if someone took him? Clara's fingers clenched around the silver ring in her pocket. Then we have to find out why. Meanwhile, at the factory, Rosa stood before Madame Estelle, her hands balled into fists to stop them from shaking. Estelle smirked from behind her desk, fingers tapping against the polished wood. Rosa, I gave you a chance to confess, but you've chosen silence. There's nothing to confess, Rosa said, forcing steel into her voice. Estelle's smile widened, cold and satisfied. Then you won't mind if I report you to the authorities. Gasps rippled through the room. Workers stopped their tasks, eyes darting between Estelle and Rosa. Paul, standing near the machines, took a hesitant step forward. This isn't necessary, Madame Estelle. Estelle turned to him sharply. Are you questioning my decision? Paul swallowed, shaking his head. No, ma'am. But Rosa's been here for years. She's not a thief. Then where did the money come from? Estelle snapped. Until she can explain that, she's a suspect. Rosa's face burned with humiliation. She turned, locking eyes with Paul. He looked torn, but fear kept him from speaking further. Get back to work, Estelle barked at the workers. Or do I need to start firing more people? Murmurs of submission filled the room as everyone hurriedly returned to their tasks. Rosa's shoulders slumped as she left the office. She felt their stares, the doubt, the suspicion, and she had no way to fight it. That evening, Clara sat on her bed, staring at the silver ring. She turned it over and over in her hands, feeling the cool metal press against her skin. There had to be something more. She lit a candle and held the ring up to the flickering light. That's when she saw it. An engraving, so small it had gone unnoticed before. A family crest. Clara's heart leaped. She rushed to her mother, holding out the ring. "Mama, look." Rosa took the ring, her brow furrowing. "What is this?" "There's something carved inside. It's not just a regular ring," Clara said breathlessly. Rosa turned it, eyes widening as she saw the delicate crest. "I've seen this before," she murmured. Clara's breath caught. "Where?" Rosa hesitated. "Years ago, before your father. It belonged to a noble family." Clara's pulse pounded in her ears. A noble family? But why would Elias have it? Rosa whispered. Clara clutched her mother's sleeve. "Mama, what if Elias isn't just a beggar?" Rosa exhaled shakily. "Then we need to be very careful." The next morning, Rosa was met with whispers and stares as she entered the factory. Her every step felt heavier than the last. Then, the voice she dreaded rang out. "Rosa Beaumont." She turned, stomach twisting as she saw Madame Estelle standing before her, arms crossed. "The authorities have been notified," Estelle said coolly. "If you don't clear this up soon, you'll have more than just rumors to deal with." Rosa held her ground. "I told you, I don't know where the money came from." Estelle smirked. "Then I hope you enjoy explaining that to the police." Gasps rippled through the factory floor. Workers exchanged nervous glances. Clara, who had been peeking from the doorway, felt her breath hitch. She couldn't let this happen. She had to find Elias. That night, as the town settled into darkness, a knock echoed through their small apartment. Rosa stiffened, exchanging a glance with Clara. Who could that be? Clara's heart pounded as she tiptoed to the door. She slowly opened it and gasped. Standing in the doorway was Elias. But this time, he was different. His hair was neatly combed, his beard trimmed. His ragged clothes were gone, replaced with a well-tailored coat. He no longer looked like a beggar. Rosa staggered back. "You?" Elias offered a small, knowing smile. "Good evening, Mrs. Beaumont," he said in a steady, commanding voice. "I believe it's time we talked." Clara clutched the ring tightly in her palm. Everything was about to change. The small, dimly lit apartment felt even smaller as Rosa and Clara stared at the man in the doorway. The frail, shivering beggar they had once helped was gone, replaced by someone entirely different. Elias, no, Leonard Beaumont, stood tall, his silver-streaked hair neatly combed, his sharp blue eyes no longer dull with weariness. His coat, fine and tailored, seemed out of place against the peeling paint of their walls. Rosa's breath hitched. Who are you?" Leonard stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I owe you both an explanation," he said, his voice steady and commanding. Clara clutched the silver ring in her fist, eyes wide. You're not just a beggar, are you?" A sad smile crossed Leonard's lips. "No, child. My real name is Leonard Beaumont, and I am the rightful owner of the factory." Rosa gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "That's impossible." Leonard exhaled, running a hand over his face. "I disappeared years ago, presumed dead. Betrayed by those closest to me. I was forced to leave everything behind. I lived in hiding, watching from the shadows as others ran what was mine." Clara's heart pounded. "Then, why did you act like a beggar?" Leonard's eyes softened as he looked at her. "Because I needed to see for myself what kind of people ran my factory. And I needed to find someone who still had kindness in their heart." His gaze fell on Clara. "And I found you." Leonard took a slow step forward, holding out his hand. "The ring, Clara. May I see it?" Clara hesitated before placing the small silver band into his palm. Leonard turned it under the candlelight, his expression unreadable. "This ring," he murmured, "is more than just luck, child. It is a family heirloom, passed down through generations of my bloodline." Rosa swallowed hard. "But why did you give it to Clara?" Leonard lifted his eyes, his face heavy with emotion. "Because I suspected the truth, and now I know." He turned to Rosa. "Your daughter, Clara, is my granddaughter. Silence. The air seemed to vanish from the room. Clara looked up, her voice small. Your granddaughter? Leonard's expression softened. My son. He was lost to me years ago. But before he vanished, he had a family. You, Rosa. And Clara. Rosa's hands trembled. My husband. He never knew where he came from. Leonard nodded solemnly. Because he was taken from me before he could learn the truth. Clara clutched her chest, her whole world shifting. That means, I'm part of your family. Leonard knelt before her, his eyes full of warmth and sorrow. Yes, my dear, and I should have found you sooner. The next morning, Leonard stood before the towering factory gates, staring up at the building that once belonged to him. Rosa and Clara stood beside him, both filled with nervous energy. What happens now? Rosa asked. Leonard's jaw tightened. Now, I take back what's mine. He turned to Clara, kneeling before her once again. I need you to be brave, Clara, because today, the truth will finally come out. Clara nodded fiercely. I'm ready. Together, they stepped inside. The moment Leonard entered, the factory floor fell silent. Workers froze at the sight of him, their eyes darting between his fine clothes and the once ragged man they had ignored. Paul's mouth fell open. It's you. Leonard met his gaze with a steady nod. Yes, it's me. Then, from across the factory floor, a sharp voice sliced through the silence. What is the meaning of this? Madame Estelle? She marched toward them, her heels clicking angrily against the concrete, her face twisted with irritation. Who let this man in? She demanded. This beggar has no place here. Leonard turned slowly, his commanding presence filling the room. I have more right to be here than you ever did, Estelle. Estelle stiffened. Excuse me. Leonard's voice was steady, but unyielding. My name is Leonard Beaumont. And this factory? It belongs to me. Gasps rippled through the factory. Workers exchanged shocked whispers, their eyes flickering between Estelle and the man who had once sat outside the gates. Estelle scoffed, masking her panic. This is absurd. Leonard Beaumont has been dead for years. Leonard stepped forward, his eyes locked on hers. You knew who I was the moment you saw me. That's why you wanted Rosa out of here. Because you knew she was connected to me. Estelle's face drained of color. You've been stealing from this factory, Leonard continued, his voice growing stronger. Skimming wages. Pocketing profits. Keeping the workers desperate and afraid. Estelle took a step back, her usual confidence crumbling. That's not true. Leonard turned to the workers. How many of you have been forced to work under unfair conditions? A murmur rose from the crowd. Paul stepped forward, voice firm. He's right. We've been suffering for too long. Others nodded in agreement. Estelle's panic grew. You're all fools. Do you really believe this imposter? Leonard lifted his head. Then let's see if the authorities believe it. A hush fell over the room. Estelle's face twisted with rage. She turned on her heel, storming toward the exit. You haven't seen the last of me, she spat. But she had nowhere left to run. Leonard stood in front of the assembled workers, his presence radiating authority. From this day forward, he said, this factory will be run with fairness and dignity. Murmurs of hope spread through the crowd. Paul, his face full of relief, stepped forward. You're really Leonard Beaumont. Leonard nodded solemnly. Yes, and I have a lot to fix. Rosa reached for Clara's hand, squeezing it tightly. Clara looked up at her grandfather, her heart swelling with pride. For the first time, things were finally changing. By the afternoon, officials arrived, taking Estelle away in disgrace. Workers cheered. The factory felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. Leonard turned to Rosa. This factory should have always been a place where people could work with dignity. I'm sorry I wasn't here to protect it. Rosa smiled, her eyes brimming with emotion. You're here now? That's what matters. Leonard knelt to Clara's level. And you, my dear, have taught me the greatest lesson of all. Clara beamed. What's that? Leonard smiled warmly. That kindness can change everything. The morning sun cast a golden hue over the town, as if signaling the start of something new. The tension that once loomed over the factory was gone, replaced by whispers of Leonard Beaumont's return. Inside Leonard's newly restored office, Rosa and Clara sat in stunned silence. Leonard took a deep breath, his expression both gentle and firm. There's something important I need to tell you, he began. Rosa, I never knew about my son's fate until now. But after hearing your story, I have no doubt. Clara is my granddaughter. Rosa's hands trembled as she clutched her daughter's small fingers. Are you sure? Leonard nodded. I lost my son many years ago. I searched for him, but it was as if he vanished. Now, everything makes sense. He turned to Clara, his eyes softening. That ring was a part of my family's legacy. I gave it to you on instinct, but now I know. It was always meant to find its way back to you. Clara, still wrapping her head around the revelation, bit her lip. So, does this mean I'm really part of your family? Leonard reached for her hand. Yes, Clara, you are my blood, and I will do everything in my power to make sure you and your mother are taken care of. Rosa's eyes filled with tears of relief, but also uncertainty. Leonard noticed and smiled gently. You're not losing anything, Rosa. You and Clara will always have a home with me. You won't struggle anymore. Clara's fingers curled around the ring. A new life was within reach. But was she ready for it? Later that evening, Rosa sat with Clara in their modest apartment. Their world forever changed. Mama, Clara whispered, why didn't Papa ever tell us who he really was? Rosa sighed, brushing a strand of hair from Clara's face. Your father didn't know, my love. He was an orphan. He didn't have answers about where he came from. Clara frowned. Then, that means grandfather was looking for him all along. Yes, Rosa murmured. And now he's found you. Clara hesitated before asking, what if Papa had known? Do you think he would have wanted us to live with grandfather? Rosa smiled softly. Your father was a humble man. He believed in working hard. But I think he would have wanted you to have choices, Clara. To have a life filled with love and opportunity. Clara sat quietly, thinking. She had always been content with their simple life. But now, there was something more. Did she want it? The next day, Leonard called for a meeting with the factory workers. The once tense crowd now looked at him with curiosity rather than fear. Standing beside him, Rosa felt a new sense of hope. Leonard cleared his throat. For years, this factory has been under corrupt management. That ends today. A murmur of excitement swept through the workers. Paul, stepping forward, crossed his arms. So what happens now? Leonard smiled. Effective immediately, I will personally oversee operations. Wages will be fair, working conditions will improve, and no one will be treated as less than human. A cheer erupted from the crowd. Leonard turned to Rosa. And as for Rosa, she will not only keep her job, but she will also receive a promotion. She will be working alongside me in the management office. Rosa's breath caught. I don't know what to say. Leonard smiled warmly. Say yes. You deserve this, Rosa. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. Yes, thank you. The factory workers clapped, a new era beginning before their eyes. That evening, Leonard sat with Clara by the fireplace in his grand home. I have another offer for you, he said gently. Clara tilted her head. What is it? I want to sponsor your education, Leonard said. Anything you wish to study, any dream you want to chase. I will make sure you have the chance to do it. Clara blinked. But I don't even know what I want to be when I grow up. Leonard chuckled. That's the beauty of it. You have time to figure it out. And I'll be here to support you. Clara glanced at Rosa, who gave her an encouraging nod. Slowly, a smile spread across her face. Then, I'll study hard. I'll make you proud. Leonard placed a hand on her shoulder, pride shining in his eyes. You already have. Days passed, and the town's whispers changed. Where once people doubted Rosa and Clara, now they spoke of their resilience. The little girl who had once been bullied now walked with her head held high. Clara still carried the silver ring, but now, it was no longer a symbol of confusion. It was a reminder that kindness had led her here, that her small act had changed her world forever. One afternoon, as she walked through the bustling town square, she spotted a young boy sitting alone, looking hungry. Clara hesitated only for a second before reaching into her pocket and pulling out a piece of bread. Here, she said, offering it to him with a smile. The boy's eyes widened as he took it. Thank you. Clara nodded. No one should be left hungry. As she walked away, she felt lighter. Her grandfather had given her a new life. But she knew one thing for certain. She would never stop helping others. The whispers had changed. Where once Clara and Rosa were the subjects of gossip, now the townspeople spoke of them with admiration and respect. The story of the kind little girl who helped a beggar, only to find out he was the true owner of the factory, had spread beyond the town square. Clara noticed the difference in the way people looked at her. The same schoolmates who had once mocked her now watched her with curious awe. Adults who had turned their backs on Rosa now nodded politely in the streets. "Did you hear?" A woman at the market whispered to her companion. "The little girl, Clara, she's really Leonard Beaumont's granddaughter. And they say she's going to change the town," another chimed in. Clara felt a strange mix of pride and nervousness. She had never asked for any of this. But now that she had it, what would she do with it? One evening, Clara sat on the balcony of Leonard's grand estate, looking out at the twinkling lights of the town below. Leonard stepped beside her, watching her thoughtful expression. "You've been quiet," he observed. "What's on your mind, my dear?" Clara traced the silver ring on her finger. "Grandfather, what happens next?" Leonard smiled. "That's up to you, Clara. You have a future full of possibilities." Clara hesitated. "I don't just want to be rich," she said, looking up at him. "I don't want to forget where I came from." Leonard's heart swelled with pride. "And you won't," he assured her. "Your kindness is what brought us all here. That will never change." Clara's hazel eyes sparkled with determination. "Then I want to help people, just like you helped Mama and me." Leonard nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Then that, my dear, is exactly what you shall do." The next morning, Leonard took Clara for a walk through the factory. It was different now. The workers no longer walked with slumped shoulders. They greeted him with respect, not fear. Paul, who had once been afraid to speak up, now stood taller, overseeing a group of workers who were finally being treated fairly. Leonard paused near the iron gates where he had once sat as a beggar. He turned to Clara. "There's something I want you to remember," he said gently. Clara looked up at him. "What is it?" Leonard smiled. "Kindness is the greatest inheritance of all." Clara grinned, those words sinking deep into her heart. Years passed. The little girl who had once walked barefoot through town, clutching a piece of bread, had grown into a young woman with a vision. Under Leonard's guidance, Clara received the best education, but she never forgot the lessons of her childhood. Instead of leaving the town for a life of luxury, she stayed. She built schools for children who once struggled like she did. She created fair working conditions for the factory employees, making sure no one suffered like her mother had. And most importantly, she never turned away from those in need. Her name became a symbol, not of wealth, but of hope. One chilly afternoon, as Clara walked through the town square, she noticed a small figure sitting near the factory gates. A young boy, thin and shivering, looking lost and hungry. Clara paused, watching as workers walked past, not noticing him. Then, without hesitation, she stepped forward. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a warm piece of bread. "Here," she said, offering it with a smile. The boy's eyes widened as he took it, his hands shaking from the cold. "Thank you," he whispered. Clara smiled warmly. No one should be left hungry. As she walked away, the silver ring on her finger glimmered in the sunlight. Some things never changed. Because kindness never ends, it only grows. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? A simple act of kindness, something as small as sharing a piece of bread, set off a chain of events that changed everything for Clara. What started as an innocent gesture turned into a story of betrayal, redemption, and the revelation of a hidden legacy. But here's something to think about. What if she had walked away like everyone else? What if she had ignored Elias, never taken the ring, never cared? Would the truth have remained buried forever? This story isn't just about fate. It's about the power of choosing kindness, even when no one else does. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment where a small act of kindness led to something bigger than you imagined? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more heartwarming, thought-provoking content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We bring you powerful stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us of what truly matters in life. Don't forget to hit the like button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Who knows? The next story might be the one that changes the way you see the world. See you in the next video.